It's a me, Mario! We're going to be reading chapter 17 of Whale Song together as a group here. Get your books out, follow along. The wolf stared at me hungrily. It was massive, its coat dark gray with streaks of black. Its eyes burned into my soul, and I saw sharp teeth and a panting tongue. Go away! The animal took a few steps forward. A memory flashed, and I heard Chief Spencer's prophetic words. When Wolf walks by her, she will remember when she is ready to see him. But I'm not ready, I shouted at the wolf. I held my breath. The wolf's ears perked, then it vanished. I remained glued to the road, unable to move. An insistent blast of a car horn sounded behind me, and I darted a look over my shoulder. My father's car was heading straight for me. I dodged to the side of the road, dragging my bike with me. I watched the car slowly back up. Then a furious face glared at me. Sarah! Nono Rocco yelled. What on earth are you doing in the road? I almost ran you over. As he scrambled out of the car, my body began to shake. Are you okay, Karina? He held my arms and examined me with concerned eyes. Are you hurt? No, I'm not hurt, Nono. I'm fine. With a frown, he tossed my bike into the trunk and we drove away. I couldn't resist glancing over my shoulder. The bushes rustled as if something hid within, but there was no sign of the wolf. The following morning, I was half convinced that I dreamt the entire episode. The ghost wolf, I determined, had been a fragment of my imagination. Christmas came and went, barely noticed in all the confusion and sadness. We all agreed that we'd celebrate the following year, when all of us, including my father, would be together. I spent most of the Christmas holidays with Goldie and Annie. That's when I told them about the wolf. Really? Goldie asked with fearful eyes. You saw a wolf? Annie was so spooked by my story that she phoned me later that night to tell me that she was sure the wolf had followed her home from my house. Of course, she didn't see anything. But I know it was the wolf, she said. The next day I bundled up in a warm jacket and searched the bushes around my house. I looked for wolf prints in the dirt, but I didn't find anything. Not one single paw print. Heaving a sigh, I darted back into my house. Nona Sophia was watering the plants, lost in her thoughts. Can I go to Goldie's house? I asked. She looked up and smiled. Be back by supper time. I gave Goldie a quick call and we agreed to meet by the boat dock. When I passed the bend in the shore, I saw her sitting cross-legged at the end of the dock. She was staring across the bay, one hand raised to shield her eyes from the sun. What are you looking at? I asked when I reached her side. Over there, she pointed. I plopped down beside her and squinted as a ray of sunlight reflected off the mirror smooth water. What? I don't see. Then I saw it. Near the shore of Fallen Island, a black dorsal fin emerged. My brother has come to visit, Goldie murmured. We watched as the killer whale crested and leapt out of the water. It crashed down on one side, creating a wall of seawater that was suspended in the air for a second. How do you know that's Robert? I asked. She pointed again. See that mark on his back? When I saw a white splotch near the whale's fluke, I nodded. That's how I know. He has a birthmark on his lower back. I watched the whale frolic in the bay. Remember when you first told me Robert was a whale? Yeah, she snorted. You must have thought I was crazy. I rolled my eyes. Absolutely whack. Look, Sarah! Goldie jumped to her feet. I stared in amazement as a second killer whale spouted nearby. The whales swam side by side before plunging into the ocean depths and disappearing. Goldie gaped at me. 2 whales in the bay at the same time? I've never seen that. So is that your brother's girlfriend? I asked with a smirk. Maybe. Her eyes grew cloudy. Or, grinning, I rose to my feet. Or what? When she spoke, her words were seriously quiet. Maybe that was your mother, Sarah. Maybe she's come to see you again. My heart skipped a beat at her suggestion. That night I curled up in the window seat and tried to pick out objects in the shadows around the house. The shed, the stack of firewood, my bike. Then my eyes wandered toward the line of tall cedar and lofty spruce trees. They touched the sky, 100 soldiers guarding my castle keep. I glanced toward the ocean as moonlight bounced off the undulating waves. I thought about the whales in the bay. Was the second one my mother? If so, would she visit me again? My throat ached and my eyes burned. I placed one hand flat against the window, its surface cold and hard. Mom, are you out there? I leaned closer, and my gaze shifted to the bushes below. Glowing golden eyes glared back at me. I jumped, snatching my hand away. A gray wolf slinked out from the dense undergrowth. It paused beneath my window and peered up at me. Ow! I scurried from the window seat and held my breath. The wolf's wistful howl cut through the air again. Shivering, I slid into bed and tried to ignore my racing heart. In January of 1980, I returned to school amidst a combination of rumors and sympathy. Mrs. Mikowski took me under her wing, encouraging me to create more posters for the school. My Romeo and Juliet poster had been well received, and in a few weeks the grade 1 students were going to present the next play, Little Red Riding Hood. I threw myself into my art. My grandparents saw me only at mealtimes, and I know that they were worried about me. Really, Nona Sophia, I said one afternoon, making these school posters makes me feel better. Then I don't have to think of Dad's court case so much. Nona Sophia brushed my hair with her fingers. You're right, Piccolina. We need to keep busy. I spent long days working on that poster. I drafted in the background with lush trees and flowers. Red Riding Hood followed a rocky path carrying her basket full of treats. There was only one problem. Every time I tried to draw the wolf, my hands shook. This is silly, I muttered after erasing the wolf for the millionth time. Taking a deep breath, I pushed away all negative thoughts and focused on the things I'd learned from Chief Spencer. Wolf is a messenger who talks to the spirits. I started on the wolf's eyes, wanting them to be cute and wide-eyed, but when I looked at the finished product, he was licking his drooling chops and eyeing Red Riding Hood hungrily. I showed Mrs. Mikowski my rough draft. Can you change his expression just a bit? My teacher asked. You'll scare all the little ones. She laughed. He's very realistic, that wolf. He's real to me, I muttered. I carefully altered the poster and eventually got it to my liking. I painted it with my mother's watercolors. When it was finished, the wolf had eyes that twinkled merrily, an intense golden color. I thought of Chief Spencer's warning, when wolf walks by her. Bold headlines in the Bamfield Examiner sensationalized my father's trial. Richardson pulls the plug out of love. His was the most controversial case the small town had seen in years. Every time I turned on the TV, I'd see a serious rookie reporter standing outside the Victoria courthouse, revealing some aspect of the trial. Some people supported my father, saying that he acted out of love and couldn't bear to see my mother suffer any longer. They called him merciful. Others said he had ruthlessly taken my mother's life, a life that only God could take. They labeled him murderer. In February, the day arrived that we had all hoped would never come, the day that I was to testify. Although a wife couldn't testify against her husband, a child could, especially one who had witnessed a crime. But my father's lawyer didn't want me on the witness stand. You're useless to me unless you remember something that'll help your dad, Mr. Gregory said in a kind voice. However, the prosecutor wasn't as kind. He was hoping that I would remember enough to make my father look guilty. That dreadful day, I anxiously took the stand, and with one hand on a black Bible, I promised to tell the truth. It seemed like such an easy, simple thing until the prosecutor began cross-examining me. He was a burly, gray-haired man in his 50s, intimidating in size and demeanor, and he didn't waste any time getting to the point. Sarah, you were with your father the day your mother died, is that correct? I nodded. Please answer out loud. Yes, I said in a small voice. He approached me, placing his hands on the rail in front of me, effectively blocking my view. At one time, were you left alone with your father in your mother's room? Yes, sir, I said a little louder. He slid his glasses to the tip of his nose and peered down at me. What happened next? I hesitated for a moment. I don't remember. Did you leave the room? I don't know. I was distracted by my father, who was anxiously whispering to his lawyer. Is it true that your father turned off the heart monitor first? A memory flashed in my mind. The heart monitor. Pa-pum. I swear I heard a heartbeat. I shook my pounding head, desperate to clear my thoughts. My stomach heaved and I thought I was going to throw up. The prosecutor turned to the jury. And that your father proceeded to shut off the life support machines, including the respirator, against Dr. Michael's orders? I envisioned the respirator pumping oxygen into my mother's lungs. Puff, puff. I could almost see my mother's chest buckling, gasping for air. I could faintly recall the colored buttons on the machines, especially the glowing yellow ones. The prosecutor thumped one hand on the rail. Answer the question, please. I glanced from the kind-looking judge in his regal robes to the man in the suit in front of me. Sorry, what did you say? Did your father shut off all the machines? Hot bile rose in my throat. I don't know. I don't remember. He glared at me. Oh, come on. You were right there in the room. Objection, Mr. Gregory called, coming to my rescue. He's badgering the witness. The child's doctor has already confirmed that Sarah Richardson has hysterical amnesia. It's brought on by extreme trauma. He eyed the prosecutor and frowned. Sarah may not have been in the room. She's telling you what she knows. She can't remember. Is there any reason to question the witness any further? The judge asked the prosecutor. The man pursed his lips. No. None at all. You may step down, Miss Richardson, the judge said in a gentle voice. My legs were numb and tingling as I walked past my father. He started to rise, but his lawyer pulled at his sleeve. Pushing past the small gate, I returned to the seat beside my grandmother. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. Later, I visited with my father and Mr. Gregory in one of the waiting areas. Everyone was tense and exhausted. You did great, honey, my father said tiredly. He looked older with every passing day. I'll see you soon. After a round of hugs, he was escorted away by a guard. On the last day of my father's court case, my grandmother cried softly, praying on a rosary during the entire drive to Victoria. When we reached the courthouse, Nona Rocco parked the car, and we walked up the steps. Inside, photographers snapped our pictures while reporters shoved microphones into our faces. How do you feel knowing that your son-in-law murdered your daughter? One man asked. Get those out of the way, my grandfather growled. He stared at me, his eyes welling with compassion, and Nona Sophia hugged me close, shielding me from the voracious claws of the paparazzi. I knew that my grandparents hated what the publicity was doing to me, to all of us. Mr. Rossetti, someone yelled, do you believe that your son-in-law killed your daughter? My grandfather spun on one heel. Leave us alone! Mr. Gregory appeared in the doorway. Mr. Rossetti, Jack wants to speak to you. He escorted Nona Rocco inside and closed the door, leaving Nona Sophia and me to wait in a tiny, private room, away from the reporters. Nona Sophia, what's going on? I asked, biting my lip. My grandmother sighed. I don't know, Piccolina. I'm sure it is nothing. Will Daddy be coming home after this? I asked, holding my breath, afraid of the answer. She put on a brave face. I'm sure he will. But I knew she was lying. My grandfather stepped into the room. His brows were pinched and his lips thinned as he glanced at Nona Sophia. He did not glare at his wife. Glanced at Nona Sophia. He whispered something to her, and her face grew alarmed. Something was wrong. We must stay here and wait, she said to me. Only Nono can go today. Why? I demanded. I want to see my dad. Nona Rocco leaned forward and gripped me lightly by the shoulders. You must be brave for your papa. It was his decision that you stay here with your grandmother. But I know Daddy would want me there, I argued, holding my head up defiantly. Why would he want me to stay here? Nona Rocco shook his head sadly. I'm sorry, but we must trust your father. He's only doing what's best for you. Someone knocked on the door, and a guard escorted us to some chairs just outside the courtroom doors. The reporters had been moved to another part of the building, so the hall was quiet. Nona Rocco kissed my grandmother and me before walking through the huge double doors. They slammed shut behind him, the boom echoing in the hall long after he was gone. It felt like we waited for an eternity. After an hour, I got to my feet and began examining the artwork that graced the hall walls in the old building. Nona Sophia, look at this painting! My grandmother rose to her feet and joined me. On the wall was a painting by an Indian artist. It showed a ceremonial dance around a campfire. That fascinated me most was the odd figure dancing around the campfire. The dancer was cloaked in a long black cape, and he wore a wolf mask. As I stared into his eyes, I thought he oddly resembled Chief Spencer's son, the one who had danced the dance of the wolf. A wave of roaring voices erupted from behind the courtroom door. I heard the sound of a gavel banging on a solid surface. Suddenly, the door beside us squeaked and swung open. A guard exited. He gave us a brief nod as he passed. My grandmother and I nervously looked at each other, unaware that the final day of my father's freedom had just arrived. Mr. Gregory and Nona Rocco stepped out into the hall. My father's lawyer patted my grandfather on the shoulder and whispered something in his ear. Nona Rocco looked at Nona Sophia. When their eyes met, he shook his head very slowly. My grandmother instantly broke into tears. I waited for my father, but he never showed. My grandparents took me aside and broke the news. After careful deliberation, the jury had found my father guilty of the second-degree murder of my mother, Daniela Andrea Rossetti Richardson. He was sentenced to 12 years in Matsqui Institute, a medium-security federal prison on the outskirts of Abbotsford, BC. I was sentenced to growing up without either of my parents. Close your books.